producer said, well, would somebody like to come up and say a piece of poetry or sing a song, just to calm things down? Nobody else volunteered, so I said, oh.
Picture it. A TV studio in the mid-1960s, the lights so bright you can almost feel the heat. The energy is electric, something you can still feel through the screen all these decades later. A young woman with a radiant smile and a twinkle in her eye steps up to the mic. The iconic opening notes ring out and she sings, "When you're alone and life is making you lonely, you can always go." And the whole world sings right along with her. This is the Petula Clark you remember. The voice of downtown, the first lady of the British invasion, a global superstar whose music became the soundtrack to millions of lives. But at 92 years old, the music is far from over. In fact, how she lives now might just surprise you. Forget any idea of a quiet retirement or a life lived in old black and white photos. The Petula Clark of today is as vibrant, creative, and defiant as ever, writing an incredible new chapter in a life that has been anything but ordinary. She's not just living, she's thriving with a landmark concert planned, a tell-all memoir on the way, and an untold story of quiet courage that proves she was always ahead of her time. This is the story of an icon who refuses to be a museum piece, an artist who is still, after all these years, living for today. To really get how amazing Petula Clark's present is, we have to go back to the beginning of her incredible career, a career that has somehow spanned over 85 years. Long before downtown was calling her name, there was Sally Clark, a little girl with a very big voice in Ewell, England. Her professional debut wasn't on some glittering stage, but during the dark, uncertain days of World War II. In 1942, at just 9 years old, she sang for the troops on a BBC radio broadcast. Her clear, hopeful voice cut through the static and the fear, a small beacon of comfort for a nation at war. It was the start of a journey that would turn her into Britain's own Shirley Temple, a beloved child star carrying the optimism of a new era on her young shoulders. Throughout the late 1940s and 50s, Petula was everywhere in British entertainment. She starred in films, appeared on countless radio shows, and kicked off a recording career that quickly made her a household name. She was the girl next door with the perfect voice, charting with hits like The Little Shoemaker in 1954, which cemented her status as a UK pop star. But as the 50s came to a close, Petula started to feel restless. The wholesome image that had made her a star now felt like a cage, and she was desperate for a change that would let her grow up. That change came in 1957, with an invitation to sing at the legendary Paris Olympia. Even with her own doubts and a bad cold, she took the stage and was blown away by the cheering French audience. It was a light bulb moment. The very next day, she was called into the offices of Vogue Records, where she met a dashing young publicist named Claude Wolff. The spark was instant. Wolff offered her a challenge. He'd work with her, but only if she agreed to record in French. She said yes, and in doing so, didn't just change her career, she changed her entire life. Leaving her girl-next-door image behind, Petula Clark blossomed into a sophisticated European singer. She embraced the passionate style of French chanson, recording songs by giants like Serge Gainsbourg, and was even gifted a song by the legendary Jacques Brel himself, an incredible honor. She became a sensation in France, Germany, and beyond. Her hits like Romeo and Chariot took over the European charts, and she became a fluent, beloved voice across the continent. She and Claude Wolff married in 1961, starting a partnership that would define the next chapter of her life. But America, the final frontier, was still out of reach. By 1964, while she was a megastar in Europe, her career back home in Britain was starting to fizzle out. And that's when fate, in the form of composer Tony Hatch, stepped in. Hatch flew to Paris with new songs, but nothing seemed right. Frustrated and about to leave, he played her a few chords from an unfinished melody, an idea inspired by his first trip to New York City. The tune was infectious, a pure burst of joy. Petula was hooked. She told Hatch that if he could write lyrics, as good as that music, she'd record it. Released in late 1964, Downtown was more than a hit. It was a cultural event. The song was a love letter to the city, an anthem of escape that hit a nerve with a world on the edge of massive change. It shot to #1 on the U.S. Billboard charts in January 1965, making Petula Clark, at 32, an overnight American superstar. She won her first Grammy for the track and was suddenly the first lady of the British invasion, a sophisticated voice among the rock and roll boys. The success of Downtown was just the beginning. For the next 5 years, Petula was a force on the American charts, with a string of optimistic hits, many written by Tony Hatch and Jackie Trent. You know them all. I Know a Place, My Love, A Sign of the Times, I Couldn't Live Without, Your Love, and the unforgettable Don't Sleep in the Subway. Her voice was the definition of sophisticated pop, a perfect mix of British cool and American energy. Of course, Hollywood came calling. She danced with the one and only Fred Astaire in the 1968 musical Finian's Rainbow, and held her own against the great Peter O'Toole in Goodbye, Mr. Chips a year later. She hosted her own TV specials and shared the stage with the biggest names in showbiz. By the end of the 60s, Petula Clark had done it all. She'd gone from a wartime child singer to a French pop idol, and finally, to a true global superstar. As the wild 1960s gave way to the 1970s, the music world started to change. The bright, optimistic pop that had made Petula a star was being replaced by gritty rock, moody singer-songwriters, and the first sounds of disco. For an artist who so perfectly captured the mid-60s spirit, this new era was a challenge. But the real turning point for Petula wasn't about fading stardom. It was about choice. It was a conscious decision to step away from the madness of global fame and toward a life that put her family first. After years of living out of a suitcase, Petula, her husband Claude, and their growing family settled in Geneva, Switzerland, in 1967. They had 3 children, daughters Barbara and Catherine, and a son, Patrick. The life of a superstar was thrilling, but it had a price. Petula has been surprisingly honest about how hard it was to balance her massive career with being a mom. She's admitted to feeling guilty and heartbroken about being away from her kids for long stretches. This conflict, the pull between the stage and home, was a huge reason she decided to hit the brakes. She didn't vanish, but she did intentionally step out of the pop whirlwind. The #1 hits became less frequent, and she started picking her projects more carefully. This wasn't failure. It was her finally calling the shots. After decades of her career being managed by others, Petula Clark was choosing her own way forward. A huge part of this new chapter was a return to the theater. In 1981, at her kids' urging, she took on the role of Maria von Trapp in a major revival of The Sound of Music in London. Her performance was a shock to many, proving her talents went far beyond a 3-minute pop song. She wasn't just a singer. She was a powerful actress. This kicked off a long and celebrated career on the stage. She rescued a struggling Broadway production of Blood Brothers and earned fantastic reviews. But her most iconic role was Norma Desmond in Andrew Lloyd Webber's Sunset Boulevard, which she performed in London and across the U.S. Playing the faded, delusional movie star was a world away from the sunny promise of Downtown, and she owned the role with a haunting power that captivated everyone. It was a bold, risky choice that showed off her incredible range. Throughout the 70s, 80s, and 90s, she kept recording and performing, but at her own pace. It was more about what she wanted to do than what the charts demanded. Her life with Claude Wolfe also changed. While they separated romantically in the 1990s, they never divorced and remained incredibly close. They continued to support each other, a modern arrangement that worked for them. It was a testament to the deep bond they'd built together. This period is key to understanding the woman she is today. It was a time of redefining what success meant. It was no longer about having the #1 song in the world. It was about building a life that was both creative and fulfilling. She proved that an artist could have more than one act. She'd been the child star, the French sensation, and the pop icon. Now she was the respected stage actress, the enduring performer, and the head of her family. It was the quiet, steady work of building a legacy not on hit singles, but on the solid rock of true talent. In the dazzling story of Petula Clark's career, there's a quieter chapter that says more about her character than any gold record ever could. It's a moment of quiet defiance that, looking back, put her on the right side of history. It happened in 1968, on the set of her own NBC television special, and it involved a simple, spontaneous gesture that sent shockwaves through the halls of corporate power. To get the weight of this moment, you have to remember America in 1968. The country was torn apart by the Vietnam War, and the civil rights movement was at a boiling point. Racial tensions were incredibly high. In this charged atmosphere, Petula was set to perform a duet with her special guest, the legendary singer, actor, and activist, Harry Belafonte. The song was an anti-war anthem she'd written called On the E, Path of Glory. During the taping, as they reached the song's emotional peak, something completely unscripted happened. Caught up in the performance, Petula instinctively reached out and briefly, gently, touched Harry Belafonte's arm. It was a simple human moment, a connection between two artists. Today, no one would blink an eye. But in 1968, it was an earthquake. When an executive from the show's sponsor, Chrysler, saw the footage, he was horrified. He didn't see artistic unity. He saw a white woman touching a black man on national television. The sponsor's demand was immediate. Cut that moment. They insisted on using a different take, one where the touch didn't happen. The message was clear. They wanted the performance, but without the politics of interracial contact. The pressure on Petula and her husband-manager, Claude Wolfe, was huge. A primetime TV special was on the line. The easy thing to do would have been to just make the cut. But Petula and Claude refused. They were disgusted by the demand, recognizing it as blatant racism. They stood their ground. They told the NBC executives that if the original performance was altered in any way, they would order every other piece of tape for the special to be destroyed. They were willing to scrap the entire show rather than give in to prejudice. It was a stunning act of courage. Faced with having no show to air at all, NBC and Chrysler reluctantly backed down. When the special, Petula, aired on April 2, 1968, the duet was broadcast exactly as it was taped. The touch remained. It's widely considered the first time on American television that a man and woman of different races exchanged that kind of physical contact. Petula Clark never bragged about this moment. She and Belafonte have always said it was just a natural, unplanned thing. She wasn't an activist in the same way Belafonte was, but when her principles were put to the test, she didn't flinch. She used her power not with a protest sign, but with a firm commitment to decency. This story reveals the steel backbone beneath the pop star shine, proving that the woman who sang about bringing people together downtown was also a woman of immense and quiet courage. Fast forward to today, and you'll find a Petula Clark who is not just resting on her laurels, but actively building on them. At 92, an age when most have long since retired, Petula is in the middle of a creative renaissance. The life she lives now is a powerful lesson in aging not just with grace, but with purpose, passion, and a momentum that artists half her age would kill for. And maybe the most surprising thing is her attitude about getting older. In an industry obsessed with youth, Petula has gone her own way. She's embraced aging as a natural process, famously rejecting plastic surgery. Her face is a map of a life fully lived, and she wears it with confidence. She's not focused on recapturing her youth, but on living in the present and continuing the work she loves. This period has also brought profound personal loss. In March 2024, Claude Wolfe, her husband of over 60 years, her collaborator and the father of her children, passed away at 93. Though they had lived separately for years, their bond was unbreakable. She announced his passing with overwhelming sadness, calling him her husband of so many amazing years. It was the end of an epic partnership that took them from a small Paris office to the height of global fame. Yet, even in the face of such a devastating loss, her resilience shines through. That strength is fueling an incredible amount of new work. She isn't just touring her greatest hits, she's still creating. Her 2017 album, Living for Today, proved her voice remains a magnificent instrument, featuring both original songs and beautiful interpretations of classics like the Beatles' Blackbird. As if that weren't enough, she's also planning a landmark concert in London to celebrate the 60th anniversary of Downtown. Think about that. 6 decades after that song changed her life, she'll take the stage with a full orchestra to celebrate its legacy. When she talks about performing, you can hear the excitement in her voice, describing the connection with the audience as an almost spiritual experience. That love of performing is the fuel that keeps her going, and for the first time, she's ready to tell her own story. In October 2025, she is set to release her autobiography, titled Is That You, Petula? The title is a nod to a question John Lennon once asked her during his famous bed-in for peace. The book promises an honest look at her incredible life, from her complicated childhood to the stories behind the spotlight, with encounters with everyone from Frank Sinatra to Elvis Presley. The Petula Clark of today is a marvel. She's not a nostalgia act, she's a working artist. A writer, a performer, a recording star. She lives a life that honors the past while being firmly and excitingly planted in the present, always looking to the future. The revelation isn't just that she's still with us at 92, it's that she's still creating, still contributing, and still surprising us all. The legacy of Petula Clark is massive. It can't be defined by a single song or a single decade. Hers is a story of incredible longevity and a chameleon-like ability to adapt, moving through changing times without ever losing her core of grace and pure talent. Think about the sheer scale of her journey. She started as a voice of hope for a nation at war. She then became a queen of European pop before Downtown made her the first lady of the British invasion. When the pop charts changed, she didn't just disappear, she reinvented herself as a celebrated theater star in shows like The Sound of Music and Sunset Boulevard. Her musical legacy alone is staggering. With over 68 million records sold, her songs are part of our lives. They've appeared in films like Girl Interrupted and shows like Seinfeld and Lost, introducing her work to new generations. Contemporary. Artists still cover her songs, and her vocal perfection remains a benchmark for singers everywhere. But her legacy is more than just music. It's in her quiet character, in that untold story of her stand against racism on national television. It's in her unique and enduring partnership with Claude Wolfe. And it's in the honest way she's talked about the struggle of balancing a global career with motherhood, giving a human face to the pressures on working women. And now, her legacy is being defined by this remarkable final act. She's teaching us a lesson on aging. In a world that often makes older women invisible, Petula Clark is standing in a brilliant spotlight of her own making. She is a beacon of vitality, proving that creativity has no expiration date and that passion for your art is the true fountain of youth. Looking ahead, the story, amazingly, is still not over. With a landmark London concert on the books and her deeply personal autobiography set for a 2025 release, Petula Clark isn't winding down. She's in the middle of a powerful creative surge. She continues to plan, to write, to perform. She's looking forward, not back. Her journey has taken her from the black and white broadcasts of the 1940s to the digital streaming age, and she's navigated it all with an elegance and resilience that is simply inspiring. The little girl who sang for the soldiers became the grand dame of popular music, and she's still going. Who else from this incredible era of music deserves a tribute? Is there a legend whose story you'd love for us to tell? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this look into the surprising and inspiring life of Petula Clark, please give this video a like, and be sure to subscribe for more stories about the icons and trailblazers you love. From the hopeful anthems that defined a generation, to the quiet courage that defined her character, Petula Clark has always been more than just a voice. She is a symbol of endurance, a portrait of grace, and a shining example of artistic vitality. At 92, she is not a memory. She is a headline. She is not a closed book. She is writing her most revealing chapter yet. Her music taught us that when you're lonely, you can always find a light. And her life teaches us that with passion and spirit, the music never, ever has to stop.